Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. So we're here to dig into the current plan for redevelopment after full demolition of 24 buildings over 5 to 7 acres in prime Chelsea. As you know, the final environmental impact statement for this proposal that is spearheaded by NYCHA jointly with HPD was actually released on Friday. What happens here matters, and it matters obviously to tenants, to neighbors, to the city, and not least to the future of public housing. I'm Leila Logiziko. I am the district leader elected to represent Chelsea, and I will moderate tonight's evening. And tonight I'm very excited that we are joined by two great urban planners, George Janes, who will walk us through the final EIS and what it actually proposes, and Alihan Polat, who will help us explore the 3D model of the development. Yes, there is a 3D model. It is interactive, it is online, and you can actually use it and play it, play with it a little bit like SimCity, except that, it's actually with real consequences. One especially important update, as I just said in my intro, there is now, so the final environmental impact statement dropped on Friday, and there is a new alternative that is included in this document, an option that would bypass ULURP entirely. ULURP is the citywide environmental review process. It is usually the time in a large development where the city council gets involved and is able to negotiate modifications to a project. So this new option that is included in this new document that was released on Friday would proceed under the City of Yes zoning initiative. And what that means, George is actually going to explain that to us. So, but let's just say that the process may be a little bit less democratic and the implications no less permanent. So here is how tonight will unfold. George is going to give a presentation on the final EIS as well as the proposal, generally speaking. We know that there is a great interest to actually, get deep into the details. Some of you know intimately what this project entails, others not so much. So we're going to try to bring everybody up to speed. And Alihan is going to guide us through the 3D visualization tool and answer more specific questions so we can explore the scale, scope of the development, that is being proposed. After that, we will open up to your questions, and we will take as many as we possibly can. Please use the raise hand function in Zoom. When called on, you will have 30 seconds to ask your questions. I am asking you, do not make a comment, do not give a speech, do not offer your stream of consciousness. Just ask a question, and we will do everything we can to answer all the questions. Some of your questions we may not have answers. And some of your questions and answer may not be available altogether. But we will do everything we can to seek answers to these questions if we don't have those answers ready. If your question is too long, I will interrupt you. And if you don't have a question, we'll move on. We have a lot to cover, so I really appreciate your cooperation. And this is it for my intro, and I'm turning it back to you, George. Very eager to hear all your knowledge and expertise on this issue.
Oh, Leila, thank you so much. I will share my screen, and hopefully everyone can see that.
Yes, we can see it.
Excellent. Okay. All right. So today we're going to quickly go through the proposal, as Leila said, and then do a lot of stuff in 3D and then by the numbers. I'm also going to summarize the environmental impacts and discuss the possible timeline. So as most of you know, the proposal is to demolish the existing Elliott-Chelsea houses as well as Fulton and redevelop them with entirely new housing, right? And we see a map here showing them in context. Fulton was Fulton was developed in 1965. Elliott-Chelsea was developed between 1947 and 1968, and they were developed as this tower in the park style development, which was popular in the mid 20th century. The idea that people would live in, relatively tall buildings, but surrounded by open space and green space. That open space would also have, parking spaces for folks. This style contrasts with much of the built environment around it, as you can see on this 3D view. And also, it's kind of gone out of style. A lot of the zoning that we developed in 1961 facilitated this kind of tower in the park style development. And all of those rezonings really over the past 30 years have been moving away from that to require less open space and what is considered today to be better urban design. NYCHA says that the current buildings are in poor shape and deteriorated and substandard. Those are their words. They say that the issues of the buildings negatively impact the quality of life of the residents. Their proposed solution is to do the staged demolition and replacement of all NYCHA units. The NYCHA units would be replaced by units that qualify for project-based Section 8. In addition to the NYCHA units, there'll be new income-restricted units, as well as market rate units, which are proposed to be included on the sites, all mixed together. Now, of course, before any of this can be done, the NYCHA and HPD as joint lead agency must do an environmental impact statement. They must study the environmental impacts of the project. As most of you know, this resulted in the draft EIS, and then a final EIS, which was released on Friday. It includes some new materials, and Alihan and I did a crash course since Friday to try to get up to speed, but it's a very large document. We did our best, but I'm sure there's going to be holes in it. As a part of study the environmental impacts, you also study, the EIS also studies alternatives. So the FEIS includes the 7 alternatives, the one of which is new, as Layla was saying, the non-rezoning alternative with City of Yes, which is a brand new alternative. But the idea here is that the rezoning alternative remains NYCHA's preferred alternative. And then there's a non-rezoning alternative, a mid-block alternative, which is also a rezoning alternative, a rehabilitation and infill alternative, and then a no significant impacts alternative. So there's all 7 of these are studied at varying degrees in the environmental review. But NYCHA said that there are 4 feasible scenarios. The other scenarios are infeasible. The 4 that are feasible are the rezoning alternative, which again is the preferred one, the non-rezoning alternative, the mid-block bulk alternative, and the non-rezoning alternative with City of Yes. But what does it mean when we say rezoning? Most of both of the sites are rezoned in a district called an R8. And the R8 typically produces buildings that look like the image on the right, where you have a relatively tall building surrounded by open space, sometimes parking, sometimes green space, sometimes both. And it was designed to essentially produce buildings very similar to what you see on the campus right now. Basically, if there is less open space, the buildings need to be smaller. And if there's more open space, the buildings can be bigger. The existing buildings that are there right now are underbuilt according to current zoning, meaning that with this current zoning, they could be bigger. R8 zoning would allow buildings on this site to be about twice as large. And the rezoning proposal would change the R8 district to something else. Now that's something else that is not named, but it is described. It is described that the mid-block would be a floor area ratio, which is essentially the amount of density on the site, where higher is more and lower is less. It would change the density on the site from what it is now, about 6, to what it is to 8. And then the maximum FAR within 100 feet of the avenue would go up to 12. And this is a common pattern in New York City, where you have taller buildings on the wider streets and shorter buildings on the mid-block. And they're proposing something similar here. The zoning tool mandatory inclusionary housing would apply, which would mean that between 20 and 30% of the housing units would have to be income restricted. And also a rezoning would also mean a special permit. And they're talking about getting a large, what they call a large scale general development special permit, which allows for waiving of certain zoning rules, like how floor area is distributed on the site, the size of courts, yards, and then the distance between buildings, and then height and setback. And essentially, it allows for a lot of flexibility for large projects. A lot of large projects have these special permits. Okay, sorry. So the new scenario, it's the FEIS includes a new scenario that reflects the new City of Yes rules. So in December 2024, the city significantly changed zoning regulations in the city of New York, and you may have heard about it, called the City of Yes. It were 3 big efforts that went from 2023 to 2024, and there were major changes to the zoning. And it also included significant changes to this specific district, the R8 district. And under these new rules, a new non-zoning alternative was developed. And this new alternative gets the applicant much of what they want, but not everything, and it does not require a rezoning. The rezoning scenario remains the preferred alternative, but they have this new one gives them another option. And so what we're going to do next is we're going to go through the scenarios using these digital massing models. And they all follow the same convention. The color of the buildings signify the use, where the gray parts of the buildings are what we consider accessory building mechanicals. The yellow parts of the building are residential use. The blue parts of the buildings are community facility uses, and the red parts are commercial. And we will also see lines on the massing models, which signify floor lines. And they reflect the plans that are shown in the FEIS, which sometimes produce odd conditions. We noted this in the DEIS, that they have this plan which says that this building is going to be 62 feet and 10 stories, which means that it is 6 feet floor to floor. We thought that this error would be corrected. It was not. It's still in there. There are still some other relatively minor errors. But for this, we just got a new alternative on Friday, and Alihan has been working on it. And we did not have time to lay them all out in the PowerPoint, which means we're going to have to do it live. So what I am going to do is I am going to leave the presentation, and then Alihan is going to share his screen and go over the scenarios live. So I'm going to stop sharing now. Alihan?
Thank you, George. Okay, so you should be seeing my screen right now in the modeling environment. Good evening, everyone. What we're looking at right now is an overall view, a bird's eye view of both sides. You're seeing on the right side, the Fulton houses, and on the upper left, Elliott-Chelsea, within the context of the Chelsea and the surrounding areas. So we see a little bit of the Hudson River as well. And on the corner of my screen, in the upper corner, we see the Hudson Yards development. So this model right now reflects the existing conditions I'm going to slowly go into each site. First, we're going to start with the Fulton houses, and then I will walk you through all the development scenarios that we modeled. And then I will switch to Elliott-Chelsea. And then again, we will look at the development scenarios one by one. And then we would have some flexibility so I could move around later if we need to. So let me move to the Fulton houses. Okay, so we see the Fulton houses in context right now. This shows the existing conditions of what it is there right now, just like George explained. The colors reflect to the individual uses of the floor. So the mechanicals and bulkheads are appearing in dark gray. The pale lighter yellow is the existing residential. And then the light blue is showing the existing community facility space. So going through from existing to the preferred scenario, which is named as preferred studio in the FEIS, which is the rezoning scenario, I will click and make the switch. So it entitles removal of all buildings on the site and then introduction of multiple buildings in tower and then mid-rises, as you could see on the screen. So the color is showing the same thing, kind of like slightly darker yellow is to indicate that this is the proposed residential. And then the darker gray color refers to mechanicals and bulkheads as shown in their site plans. And then the lighter blue color indicates for community facility. We don't see it in this view, but when we see kind of like a pale pinkish red, that will reflect to local retail as it is shown in the plans. So before I move and make any changes with my view angle, I'm going to slowly go through each iteration, each alternative. Like I said, this is the preferred alternative in the FEIS, which is also called the rezoning alternative. So our next alternative we're going to look at is the non-rezoning alternative. So switching from rezoning to non-rezoning, which show us what the existing zoning would allow to be constructed in the site. So this is the non-rezoning alternative. So we see some retail in the reddish pink color, and then the other colors stay the same. As you can see, the buildings are significantly shorter on multiple sites, and one site they're actually pretty similar. The next alternative I'm going to show is going to be the mid-block alternative, which is also rezoning alternative. It is exactly the same floor area, just the building bulk is shifted from rezoning alternative. So let me click that. So this is the mid-block alternative. Again, this is in the FEIS as a rezoning alternative. It's just not the preferred alternative. So George and Leila, just to make sure that everybody understands, I'm going to quickly switch between the preferred rezoning alternative and the mid-block alternative, since they're showing pretty much the same square footage, same floor area ratio, but just buildings put into slightly different locations. People can actually see the difference. So this is the preferred rezoning alternative. As you can see, most of the bulk and the height is along the wide street, along the avenue. And then the mid-block basically reduces those tower heights and pushes some of the massing more towards through the mid-block, through the site. So our next alternative in the FEIS is the infill alternative. So the infill alternative is very similar to obviously the existing conditions with some infills that are put in. And then the last but not least alternative we would be looking at is the new alternative that appeared in the final EIS. That is the alternative with City of Yes. Like George mentioned, the FEIS says this doesn't need any rezoning, but it is with the new City of Yes provisions. So this is the City of Yes alternative. For City of Yes alternative, we're still exploring all the documentation released last Friday. So you're only seeing two land use colors in here, mechanical and residential. There are going to be community facilities and local retails in Likely most of the ground floors of the proposed buildings, they're not in place yet. So we're still working on the documentation and numbers to adequately visualize them. But this is the completed massing with floor lines and the mechanical bulkheads shown on the Fulton Houses site. So before I move to the next site, to Elliott-Chelsea, I'm gonna do a slow rotation around this site so we could actually see it from different angles so that you can actually see the buildings versus the gaps between the buildings. Here it is. And then I will keep rotating. So I will actually look at it from more like north looking into south. Here you go. And just for a quick show, I'm going to go through the alternatives again on this site. So this is the latest alternative that is shown in FEIS, the City of Yes alternative. And this is the rezoning alternative. And this is the rezoning alternative with the massings around mid-block. The non-rezoning alternative would show up like this. And then the last alternative would be the infill alternative. There you go. So I'm going to move into the next site right now, which would be the Elliott-Chelsea. So let me go into the existing conditions again so we could do the same exercise that we do in here. Okay. So this is the Elliott-Chelsea housing. Again, our viewpoint is towards like Hudson River, looking into northeast directly to the site. This is the Chelsea Park. So this shows the existing conditions of the model. The first alternative we're going to look at is the rezoning, the preferred alternative in the FEIS. So this is the preferred alternative. The non-rezoning alternative for Elliott-Chelsea would look like this. So in pretty much all alternatives, the building in the northern block in the center stays exactly the same. The mid-block alternative, which requires rezoning, would look like this. So the mid-block alternative and the rezoning alternative for Elliott-Chelsea site is exactly the same, identical. Mm-hmm. And then the infill alternative would be very similar to existing conditions, except there is a building added and enlargements in the community facilities. And then again, last but not least, the City of Yes alternative, which is the latest alternative released in the FEIS, would look like this. And the disclaimer for the City of Yes alternative, again, we are only seeing two different colors in here, yellow for the proposed residential and dark gray for the proposed bulkheads and mechanical. We're still working on the numbers and documentation so we could implement what is on the ground floor of all these buildings according to the FEIS documents.
Alihan, can I ask you, how tall are the buildings on the avenue here and then compared to the rezoning scenario?
Sure. So I can actually, while we look at it, I could read you through the documentation. I have them in front of me. So the rezoning scenario for, and you're talking about the Elliott-Chelsea, this site, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So for the rezoning scenario, let me first go to rezoning scenario. This building that we see on 10th Avenue, as we see it on the 3D model right now, is at 301 feet. And then the building on the southern part of the site, which is taller than that, is at 385 feet, this building.
How does that compare?
So City of Yes alternative is relatively shorter. If you give me 1 second, I'll read the building heights and City of Yes alternative as well. So the City of Yes alternative compares to 226 feet in the building to the north and 208 feet to the building to the south. And all these heights include bulkheads as well.
And Alihan, it would be helpful to actually mention the tallest building in the rezoning alternative.
Sure. So let me switch to the rezoning alternative. The tallest building in the rezoning, pretty much in all scenarios, is what the documentation calls building 1. So I'm highlighting building 1 right now, which is actually in the center of the site, just across from Chelsea Park. So the tallest building, the maximum height above the bulkhead is listed as 428.5 feet. And that stays exactly the same in mid-block alternative and also in the latest City of Yes alternative as well.
And in terms of stories, do you have this number?
Sure, it's 39 stories as indicated. This building has some irregular floor-to-floor heights as per our first analysis from DEIS. I think it lists a significant amount of community facility space. So as you could see, the floor-to-floor of typical residential floors are pretty much the same throughout all the building, but you have almost double height spaces in the ground floor and in the lower floors of the building. But it is listed as 39 stories.
And just so that people understand, is that a hard limit that could not be exceeded, or is it just how it is represented? Is there a height limit that is baked into the current zoning?
There wouldn't be, no. So that's what's being studied in the environmental review. And so what they need to do is they need to study a reasonable worst case development scenario. So there, it shouldn't be any taller. It could be different, right? What actually gets developed after this. It could be smaller, but it's not supposed to be any taller. But it was not considered to be reasonable to do another one. But I will say that if there is a large scale plan, LSGD, when I said a special permit earlier, if they require a large scale plan, that would mean that building heights would have to be written into that plan with a special permit, and they couldn't be changed without another CPC, City Planning Commission action. It just raises the bar to make it more difficult to change that.
Okay, very helpful. So moving on, Alihan, do you want to show us other angles of Elliott-Chelsea? Are you actually able to
Yes.
this
Sure.
rotation?
Yes. So let's actually look at from the same angle that we looked to the Fulton houses as well. So I'm going to move my viewpoint a little bit to the north, and I'm going to look towards the south, and I'm going to keep the Chelsea Park in context as well. So this is the rezoning scenario, the preferred alternative as the DEIS states. This would be the mid-block. And like I previously said, the mid-block scenario and the preferred rezoning alternative are identical. And the City of Yes, which is the latest one from the FEIS, would actually look like this. So
And
the other alternatives, yes, go ahead.
are you able to continue this rotation? Because I can see that we have a number of residents of London Terrace who are on the call, and I'm sure they would be interested to see, you know, what kind of an impact it's going to have, you know, from them. And, you know, they obviously live one block south of this development.
So let me actually rotate 90 degrees and let's look from this angle. That might answer some of their questions like this. So let me switch all the way to the existing conditions so we could do a compare and contrast. So this is the existing conditions and the rezoning scenario, which is the preferred alternative in FEIS, would look like this. The mid-block scenario would be the same. And then the City of Yes scenario would actually change the building orientation mostly in the southern block. So the buildings are not only north and south, but they're also east and west as well. And then the other alternatives to look at from this angle would be the non-rezoning scenario, and then the infill scenario, which is existing conditions plus the new building right across from Chelsea Park.
Okay, that's very helpful.
Of course. And let me switch back to the preferred alternative, the rezoning alternative, so we can kind of like see that on the screen. Any other, George, Layla, any other?
Yeah, I actually,
viewpoints?
the orientation change is something that I actually didn't click until you showed it to me. It's like right now these are oriented north-south. And then which was the one that oriented them east-west?
So City of Yes
Oh.
orients the mid-block buildings east-west. So obviously we don't know what the actual design is. Like you said, these buildings could be different. But one thing that comes into our mind is that the rezoning alternative keeps them north and south because they are significantly tall buildings. And the tower footprint would have less shadow impact if it was designed like this rather than an east-west, because then the slab is going to create very large shadows. I mean, these slabs are going to create very large shadows on the park itself anyway, but once we rotate these buildings 90 degrees, the shadow impact would be much higher than what they are currently. So the height difference between the City of Yes and rezoning scenario, as you can see, is not very significant for these buildings, but still there is a height difference.
Yeah, very, very interesting. Great. That's, I think, very, very insightful. And just so that everybody understands, this 3D model lives on a website that is publicly accessible. So for all of you who feel frustrated or want to play more with it, the link is available actually on all the emails that I have been sending to notify you of this this event. And it is pretty intuitive, so you should be able to play with it, and you can actually toggle between the different alternatives.
Yeah, one thing on that, just so it's clear, is that Alihan is showing you this in the actual modeling environment that he works in, and we're still actually putting the final touches on what was released on Friday. So that link that you set around hasn't yet been updated to reflect the City of Yes alternative. Which we just got on Friday, right? And so we will be updating that link sometime over the next day or two with the updated City of Yes alternative, which will also include, the uses on the ground floor that Alihan hasn't done yet, and it's a couple of other little things he's still working out. It's just all, it's all still a work in progress since it was just released on Friday.
Yeah, great. That's very, very helpful, and great tool to really get a better visualization of the impact of the development.
Right.
Great. So Alihan, one quick question. You gave us the height of the buildings for Elliott-Chelsea. Would you be able to do the same for Fulton?
Of course, absolutely. So let me rotate a little bit so we can actually see the 10th Avenue buildings in scope as well. Okay, so let me go to City of Yes alternative. So here is the City of Yes alternative.
But you want to go to Fulton.
Yes, that's right.
I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm just gonna go to the Fulton. Okay, here we go. So let me switch our viewpoint so we can actually see the 9th Avenue in context. Here we go. So for City of Yes alternative on Fulton site, all 3 buildings on 9th Avenue are very similar in height. They're shown with a foot less or more from each other. And I believe that has to do with base plane, where they start measuring the actual building height. But the first building that you see in the south, which is on 16th Street, is shown as 197 feet. So this is the building that's shown at 197 feet. The second building, a block north of that, is shown at 198 feet. And the building north of that, which is the third building that almost follows the same building massing, is shown as 197 again. So the building all the way into the corner, which would be this building, is shown at 145 feet and 5 inches to the roof. We don't really know the exact height of the bulkhead for this building. It's not listed in the plans, but we just use the 40 feet bulkhead to be consistent with the other buildings. And for the rezoning alternative, let me switch to the rezoning. The buildings are significantly taller, as you can see. So for the rezoning alternative, the first building on the 19th Street, this building, is at 145 feet and 5 inches. The first tower, just south of that, the maximum height on this portion of the tower is 329 feet and 4 inches. The tower in the middle, this one, again along 9th Avenue, is at 385 feet and 6 inches. And then the building south of that is 368 feet and 3 inches.
Okay.
And then the other significant building on this one is the building that is on 17th Street to the west of the site, the one that I'm pointing out with my mouse pointer right now. That is at almost 348 feet, like an inch short of that.
And in terms of stories, we are at an equivalent number as Elliott-Chelsea at 39 stories.
So this is at 32 stories. This building is at 32 stories. And the buildings on the 9th Avenue are pretty much all the same. They are on 34 stories.
Okay, very, very helpful. Great. So as we move this conversation along, George, are you able to tell us a little bit about the impacts of the buildings?
So yeah, I mean, so what we could do now is I could pop back into the presentation, or if people have questions specifically about the viewpoints that Alihan is looking at, we can take those now. It's up to you, Leila.
Why don't we keep all the questions for the end? I find that, you know, it flows better when we get the full.
It is not a problem. Let me share my screen again. And okay. And you know, we threw some of these photo simulations that they have in the environmental review into here. I'll page through them quickly. They haven't updated any of these, meaning it's only what they're showing is only their rezoning alternative and their mid-block alternative. And that's from 9th Avenue looking south. And then here's 9th Avenue looking north with the rezoning alternative and the mid-block alternative, showing the shorter buildings on the avenue, but you would have taller buildings on the mid-block because they're the same size. In this case, we're at 10th Avenue looking south, looking at both of the rezoning scenarios for Elliott-Chelsea. So the rezonings nearly triple the size of the development at Fulton Houses, right? So the no action is 944 units. The rezoning brings it up to 2,732 units. The no rezoning is close to 2,000. But the city of Yes is really pretty close to the rezoning alternatives, meaning it's like about 300, a little less than 300 units. So it's very substantial with the new City of Yes rules. It's really very close. And the rezonings would increase the number of units by about 2.5 times at Elliott-Chelsea, going from 1,100 to about 2,800. And the City of Yes, again, it's 2,300. It's pretty substantially close to the rezoning scenario.
George, I just have a quick question on this slide. When you look at line 3, affordable dwelling units,
Yeah.
the rezoning has 501, but the City of Yes has 35. Is that
It's
the
because
slide is cut?
it's because the slide is cut.
Okay, I want to
There,
make
you can
sure
see
that.
it. Yeah, so it was all a work in progress, There it
Um,
is.
Great,
Thank you
because
for
I
that.
think this is going to be, as you know, this community is, has always been a strong advocate for affordable housing, although
Yeah.
we meant that, affordable is actually not affordable, but, that's another conversation. But, certainly want to know that we're building as many of these affordable units if we are going to go through this, incredibly
Yep.
disruptive and massive development. So with the City of Yes, it would only produce 356 units.
356, I'm calling them affordable. They're also called income restricted units that essentially require an HPD lottery. And then also it has the 1,112 replacement units that would be project-based Section 8.
Yeah, so those numbers don't change. You can
Right.
see that it is consistent, throughout the entire exercise, whether
Absolutely.
it's the no action, rezoning, no rezoning, mid-block, rehab, City of Yes, this number doesn't change. What changes quite drastically is actually the number of mixed income units.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Very,
yeah,
very.
that's the number of mixed income and also market rate units, right? There's a change in that number as well. It's because that we're not changing the number of the replacement NYCHA units, right? And so whenever there's changes, it comes from those two numbers.
Got it. Okay. Very, very helpful.
Okay. And then they have a summary of, there's a lot of numbers here. I get it, but it's, I think they combined the two developments together to get total numbers. And, what you see here, it is a big development, right? It goes from 1.9 million square feet of total building area, and then with the rezoning up to 5.1 million, right? And then with the City of Yes alternative, it's still very large at 4.5 million. So these are, because the sites are so large, the development that it would attract would be enormous, right? It would be, and with that enormous development are significant environmental impacts. And so what the EIS did disclose in the DEIS, they said that there would be significant adverse impacts of these following topic areas. And they said that, we'll do mitigation measures and disclose them in the FEIS. And they did do some mitigation measures. And mitigation is proposed for each of the topic areas that have significant impact: shadows, historic and cultural resources, transportation, and then construction impacts. But the adverse impacts cannot be completely mitigated for any of these. And so there will be what they call unmitigated significant adverse impacts on these topic areas. And it's disclosed in the EIS as such. And the shadow impacts are mostly on Chelsea Park and PS 33. And, it has to do with the fact that there are tall buildings being built directly south of a park. And whenever you have that, you're going to have significant shadow impacts. And the FEIS talks about mitigating some of the shadow impact with lighting improvements. which I guess is not nothing, but it does not mitigate the significant adverse impacts on these open space resources. And then Elliott-Chelsea Houses itself is a historic architectural resource. And so its demolition is a significant impact. And to mitigate the impact, the FEIS commits to these fairly standard protocols, which I went through when we talked about the DEIS. But, you know, it's the buildings are going to be demolished. And so there's going to be significant adverse impacts. The transportation will have significant adverse impacts on both traffic and pedestrians. And there's really mild mitigation measures proposed, meaning signal timing and crosswalk widening and some removal of pedestrian obstructions on sidewalks. But the significant impacts are not going to be entirely mitigated. There remain significant construction impacts related to noise and traffic. These blue lines signify the building faces that will have significant construction noise impacts. They do propose some construction noise mitigation, but it's not going to mitigate the noise impacts to the extent that it creates it's no longer significant. There will be significant noise and traffic related impacts. And the construction impacts are temporary, but the timeline for construction is long. And what was interesting to me is that the FEIS still shows construction starting in Q3 2025 and extending to 2041 or 16 years. Q3 2025 starts tomorrow. And this is the kind of thing that when, you know, projects sometimes slip, and when you do publish the FEIS, you update the timeline to reflect the current construction schedule, and they did not do that. And in fact, they added a newer, more detailed timeline for the City of Yes alternative. So the City of Yes alternative has a construction timeline, which is brand new to the FEIS. It starts Q3 2025 and has more detail on when the different activities would happen with this, also extending to 2041. So next, the lead agency must issue a document called a record of decision, which is a NEPA requirement when you're doing a FEIS.
So George, can you explain actually what is NEPA so that people who are not familiar with all
it's the federal, right? So it's the federal regulations requiring the study of the environmental impacts of projects that involve the federal government, which is very similar to New York State has similar requirements called SEEKR, NEPA. Like this one EIS is fulfilling the requirements of both, but they have slightly different procedural things that they have to do. So when you do an EIS for the federal government, you have to issue the record of decision, which we're just going to describe the preferred alternatives, the alternatives considered, their environmental impacts, and any required mitigation, right? So it's kind of puts a bow on it. And at the same time, it doesn't have to be at the same time, but it'll likely be at the same time. They will issue a finding statement, which is the New York State requirement of putting the bow on it, where they have to talk about the impacts, how the chosen alternative avoids or minimizes the environmental harm to the maximum extent practicable. And these things can happen quickly at this point, right? So the big hurdle here was getting the EIS done. They have to do the finding statement, the record of decision. And this could happen next month. This could happen in July. So the idea that they're moving quickly is meaning that they purposely did not update the FEIS to reflect a a less aggressive schedule because they plan on having an aggressive schedule. And I point this out. They do seem to be moving quickly because NYCHA recently filed for a demolition permit on one of the Fulton buildings. This is a screenshot from the Department of Buildings. 401 West 19th Street is the building they filed the demolition permits for. And, you know, one of the stakeholders here is NYCHA. No permit has yet been issued, and a permit cannot be issued when the building is occupied. But this filing, you know, this is suggestive of moving quickly. Now, I bring that up because a lot of times with these projects, when you're doing an environmental review, you get over that hurdle and there's often a delay or a waiting period. Sometimes that waiting period is quite extensive. But in this case, it's looking like that we should not necessarily expect a long waiting period. And then a final thought on this regarding the City of Yes alternative. And I think Leila has suggested this, but it provides the applicant much of what they want without a rezoning. So City of Yes produces 4,700 between almost 4,800 units, while the rezoning produces 5,500 units. The earlier no rezoning scenario, so the one that they did for the DEIS, showed just 3,800 units. So the new City of Yes rules adds 915 units. So it makes it much more attractive to have the non-rezoning scenario. And to be clear, an EIS does not commit the applicant to a rezoning. So the applicant could go through this and say that their preferred scenario is a rezoning, and then the rezoning doesn't happen, and they could still develop according to as of right zoning right now. And so what this does, you know, it's very clear that the preferred action is the rezoning, but this is an option, and it is spelled out this way in the EIS. And if the applicant decided to take this way, it diminishes the role of city council and your council member in the process and your ability to, you know, have city council negotiate on the community's behalf as far as, you know, what might happen in the future here. So that's what I have for you today. There's a lot in here. There's a lot we haven't gotten to in terms of the environmental review, but we were able to cover the high points for sure.
Thank you so much, George. It's so timely, and we really appreciate that you were able to dig through this very, very dense document that dropped on Friday. A couple of things that I would like to add to what George and Alihan just described. In addition to this record of decision that is needed for this project to move forward, there are a number of other statutory requirements that may have to do with issues that are not baked into the environmental review.
Sure.
And they have to do with HUD regulations that are, you know, like hardcore housing regulations. But also with the fact that this is a proposed conversion from Section 9 housing into Section 8 housing, and that, you know, contemplates the full demolition of this proposal. In addition to this very, very dense document that George and Alihan just described, the final EIS, there's also a document that is known as the Master Development Agreement. That is a document, it's a contractual document that was signed between the development partners, i.e. Related and Essence, and NYCHA. It was reviewed and approved by the board in November of 2024. And this document actually spells out a number of the obligations that the development partners have vis-a-vis a number of statutes and also vis-a-vis the tenants. So, the fact that the record of decision is issued would not necessarily mean that it is a done deal. And, we've been told for the past 5 years that it is a done deal. It is certainly, getting closer to, all the approvals being secured, but I just want to emphasize that, there are other statutory requirements that are needed, including the fact that the master development agreement spells out that the financing must be entirely secured for the project. And what that means exactly remains to be defined. But certainly that's what the master development agreement says. So I just wanted to put that out. I see in the Q&A that there are lots of questions. So George, Alihan, do you think it makes sense that we just open up to questions from the audience, and then we're going to try to go through as many as we can? It's already 7:27. I think we're doing good on time. So maybe we can, jump in. As I said, you will be permitted to speak. We don't want to just, curate questions from the Q&A, but I'm really asking you to stick to 30 seconds. I will enforce that rule and ask a question. Please don't make comments. We know that, this is incredibly polarizing and, like bringing lots of emotions, but we have two experts and we will really want to use our time to get their answers. So use the raise hand function and I will promote you to panelists and you will be permitted to speak. And the lineup will be David Holoka, followed by Andrew Cronson, followed by Pamela Wolf. David, you are permitted to speak. You can unmute yourself.
Hi, thanks for the presentation, George. Look, I'm an architect, and looking at these plans that you presented, I wonder what would happen if they just did a scheme that was perimeter buildings, maintaining the street wall without the gaps between the buildings or the open spaces. Even with FARs of 8 and 12, you'd be looking at buildings of maybe 12 or 16, 18 stories tall, lower than London Terrace. Are they constrained into what they're doing by the R8 zoning, or are they driven to it by trying to create towers by inserting the open space to cash in on high floor views?
I think you may have answered your own question there. I mean, they are market rate development is a big part of this, and higher floor views are they have better returns, and so I think that's part of it. In the original non-rezoning scenario, they had certain open space requirements that they had to keep, but they don't have the same requirements under the City of Yes. The City of Yes doesn't have the open space ratio and the height factor buildings that the old R8 rezoning had, which is still part of the zoning. That's why they're still valid, meaning they have the option of doing that. But there's no reason to, because you're going to do the more flexible City of Yes scenario. So I guess, David, I would say that the zoning, they have a lot of flexibility under zoning to do what they want. They could have done the buildings that you describe, but the other incentive or disincentive is that in an EIS you want to do a reasonable worst case development scenario. So you want to show what is the worst thing that you would reasonably see from an impact standpoint, which is generally speaking the taller buildings. So while you should expect the taller buildings, yeah, you might possibly get lower buildings.
Thank you, George. Andrew, you're permitted to speak. You can unmute.
Good afternoon, good evening, rather, and thank you for this really great continued analysis. Well, there is clearly a deficit of maintenance that is needed to be addressed for NYCHA buildings. Well, one of my questions is really in terms of safety or egress and emergency, and also the materiality in terms of what the structure will be able to handle from a potential extreme scenario like fire or hurricane, like Hurricane Sandy that we had. Is there any discussion or deliberation that you know of in terms of the environmental review of which plans will allow for the strongest life and safety conditions for residents?
Oh, yeah, it doesn't really, I mean, as far as I'm aware, it doesn't really so much get into that because ultimately all of these buildings are going to have to be constructed according to the New York City Building Code, which have, standard regulations regarding fire safety, life safety, egress, light and air. And so, they all have to meet that same standard. And whether one design is better than another according to certain elements of sustainability or safety, they still all have to meet the same underlying building code standard.
Great, thank you. The next question goes to Pamela Wolf. You're permitted to speak.
Well, thank you for the permission. This is a micro question, and it just occurred to me in discussion about Elliott-Chelsea and Chelsea Park. In the 19 lefts, like 80s or 90s, I was involved with the struggle to create a park at 23rd Street at the Hudson River called Chelsea Waterside Park. And the genius of the deal we struck had to do with mitigation. What I want to know is that the theft of light from Chelsea Park, which is radical in any of these scenarios, qualify for a mitigation of the sort that we accomplished at Chelsea Waterside Park, which was that we got an entire other block to create our park, which is improperly called a waterside park, but because it's east of the highway. But still, we were able to, because Thomas Smith Park was sliced up pretty seriously in order to take the curve out of the West Side Highway, we got a big payback for that. Is anything of that sort possible for Chelsea Park to get some other piece of turf that might be city owned, that would be nearby, considered as a form of mitigation? Sorry for being so long-winded.
No, if I may, I think that's a really interesting idea. I mean, I will admit, when I went back and I looked at the FEIS, I was expecting more mitigation. They said in the DEIS, oh yeah, we're going to, look at mitigating these significant adverse impacts. We'll give you more information on with what we come up with in the FEIS, and then, for shadows on Chelsea Park, they're going to do lighting. It's hard to replace sunlight with lighting. I was expecting.
Honestly, George, I'm sorry, I don't even understand what it means, lighting. What are
they're going to put lighting fixtures to make it less dark at certain times of day.
That's a joke.
Yeah, I mean, I was surprised by that one. I hadn't seen that as a mitigation measure before. And so lighting fixtures, like LED lights. So I was surprised I was expecting something more than that. I don't know if I was expecting a new park out of it, which I think would be more than what you would expect, but I think you would expect some sort of mitigation more than what they're saying. And again, it's true. I think with all of the impacts, they have a requirement to disclose the significant unmitigated impacts, and they did that. And they have to mitigate them to the extent practicable. And what that means to the extent practicable is an issue for interpretation. Is lighting the best they could have done for Chelsea Park, or could they have done something more, as what Pamela was saying? I think they could have done something more. I'm not sure if it's what Pamela is saying is the right way forward or something else.
Just to extend on the question, which I think is a very interesting one, when would be the time to actually advocate for true mitigations? Have we missed this boat, or is it still doable?
There is no opportunity to comment at this point. The comment period is over. They have commented on, they have responded to all the comments they heard in the EIS. Alihan and I did not spend very much time going through their responses to comments because every single comment has a response to it. You know, at this point, we should go and look at what people had commented on the shadows on Chelsea Park and its impact, and if their response is actually adequate. And if it's not, again, there's no comment period, but contact the lead agency and talk about how the FEIS has failed, right? And in that element.
Great. And actually, for the record, the lead agency is HPD. Which may be a blessing.
HPD and NYCHA are co-lead agencies, right?
Yeah, but HP, because NYCHA is a public benefit corporation, although they're driving the process, they cannot formally, technically be in the driver's seat. So we have another, entity to talk to, which is always a good thing. All right, moving on to the next question. Okay, the next tag is going to be Ashina, David, Lizette, and Lydia. Ashina, you are permitted to speak. You can unmute.
Hi. So I just have a simple question.
We cannot hear you. You're very muffled.
What about now?
Much better.
Okay. So I was told that there wouldn't be like any specific tenants that would have to leave once the remodeling starts. Is that accurate?
So the way it was explained to us is that the tenants who are currently residing in the senior building at Elliott-Chelsea and in building 11 at Fulton, which is at 401 West 19th Street, would be relocated into temporary apartments while these buildings are demolished and rebuilt. And then after the rebuild, these tenants will be moved into the new buildings, and then tenants of other buildings would also be moved so that it would vacate their existing building, and they would do this sort of like, revolving cycle of demolition and reconstruction.
Okay, so there's no difference between the Section 9 and a Section 8. It's not like certain people under certain leases would have to go elsewhere permanently. It's just you would go somewhere else while they're fixing up your apartment and then you'll return.
You will not return because your apartment will be demolished. Every single apartment will be demolished under pretty much any one of these demolition scenarios.
But you'll still be under your Fulton lease, right? I live in Fulton. You'll still be under your original lease.
So no, once again, the way it was explained to us is that all the tenants would be moved from Section 9 to Section 8.
Okay.
So there would be a new lease that you would be asked by NYCHA to enter into.
Okay, but the rent is the same. Like it goes by your employment, like how it does now.
Section 8 is, different. And we have not yet seen these leases. There's and there may be a temporary lease and then a permanent lease once the permanent unit is allocated to each tenant or household. So I would not want to give you inaccurate information, but certainly the terms and conditions under Section 8 are different from Section 9. To take one example, a relocation or a transfer under Section 8 is vastly different from Section 9. So under Section 9, if a tenant is the victim of domestic abuse, there is an emergency transfer list where basically you can get a new apartment because you're in a dangerous situation, and NYCHA makes provisions for that. If you are a patient who needs dialysis and you live 2 hours away from the hospital where you're receiving dialysis, you can make a request under, for medical conditions to actually relocate. Under Section 8, these provisions do not exist. They don't exist at all. It's not that, it doesn't work the same way. It's just that, those transfers are not part of the Section 8 statute.
Okay, so you would just be signing the Section 8 lease from the Section 9, but ultimately your housing is still safe.
Your housing is safe as long as you stay in this apartment. Once again, under these projects, they are what is known as project-based, meaning that the Section 8 status is attached to the unit and not to the tenant. So if you want to move, that you would basically have to start from scratch. So long as you stay in the unit that is allocated to you, then you are, you have your housing. But if for whatever circumstance you need to move, you cannot take this Section 8 status with you to go elsewhere.
Yeah, that part I understand. I just kind of wanted to make sure like it's safe, meaning like your housing is safe. The question I just asked, like.
Yeah, and maybe this is a question that we can take offline, and maybe we can connect you
Yeah.
with lawyers, because it's more of a housing, specific question, and maybe actually we should do a similar program, but bringing housing lawyers who can actually provide this kind of guidance on really what the housing implications are for the tenants. It's actually, as I'm saying it, I think that should be our next move. So stay tuned. And thank you for this question and for, pointing the conversation in this direction. All right, the next question goes to David Warren. David, you're permitted to speak.
Hi, quick question. How will wind tunnels affect this, especially the combination between this project and Hudson Yards? That would be like a crazy wind tunnel is what I'm scared of. I mean, I live near Hudson Yards and it's already a wacky wind tunnel. I just think this would like square root it.
That's interesting. So wind is you sometimes have to study wind in the urban design and visual resources section of because it affects urban design, and I don't know if they studied that. It's not something that I looked at. It's something that we can look at and see if they did any sort of study on wind in the EIS. There is no chapter on that. It's just folded into another chapter.
Thank you. The next question goes to Lizette Colon. Lizette, you're permitted to speak. You can unmute, Lizette. All right, let me move to Lydia Andre. Lydia, you're permitted to speak.
Hi, George.
Hi, Lydia.
I wanted to ask you, throughout the responses in the FEIS, there are comments from the responders such as duly noted.
Yeah.
Do you consider that to be an adequate response to questions that could have responses? And also, when people respond like that, does that open the door for, in your opinion, other types of actions against the FEIS, namely, lawsuits and things like that? Or is that just considered within the range of acceptable to say duly noted?
That's common. Okay, so in an EIS, and this is not only the federal ones, but state ones as well, they have to respond to every comment. And if the question is more of a comment rather than something that they feel needs an actual response, they will say, duly noted. And it is the most common response in either any EIS you'll see, is because people, people aren't very often aren't asking specific questions. They're saying what they think about the project. And very often they think things about the project that aren't good or sometimes good. And the lead agency will say, we heard you, we heard this comment, and we have noted it. So I have never heard somebody successfully challenge that in an EIS. Where you're successful in an EIS is if they skip steps. If you submitted comments and they didn't answer them at all. A duly noted says that we read your comment, we heard your voice, and we noted it and moved on. And that, as far as judges are concerned, is typically what they need to do.
Okay.
Okay, great, thank you.
The next question goes to Michelle Spinner. You are permitted to speak, Michelle. You can unmute.
Just a quick question about Section 8 funding becoming severely diminished. The federal government, Layla, you wrote a really phenomenal summary of, the potential impact here. It's altogether possible that these projects won't be completed if they're dependent on Section 8 funding. What happens? How is this even being addressed?
Yeah, maybe I'm gonna give the first crack at an answer to that, Michelle. It is probably the question to which we don't have an answer because the fiscal 2026 federal budget is still being negotiated, so it hasn't been finalized. But furthermore, what we know, that is currently being proposed and being negotiated is actually a total overhaul of how funding of housing is done by the federal government, whether it is public housing, Section 8, senior housing, housing for the disabled. It is going to be entirely different from what we have known to be for the past decades. And it is unclear what consequences it is going to have on this project, but certainly it could have drastic consequences. And the worry that I underscore in my memo is that I really worry that this project would start moving forward, and then it would be realized that actually the funding that the developer was banking on as guaranteed rent roll paid by HUD is not going to materialize because it is no longer there, and because it is allocated and apportioned through the state, and the state is going to have to provide for all its public housing, whether it is in Buffalo or Syracuse or New York City, they're all going to be competing for the same dollars. And it is, a very dangerous, certainly, fiscally, questionable proposition to all of a sudden, move forward with a project where the funding could disappear. Because what we know of developers, and these projects would be under private management, okay? So NYCHA would no longer be the manager of these buildings. Private developers are in the business, and we can't blame them for that, but they're in the business of providing income and revenue to their investors and their lenders. That's their job. So if the project is no longer lucrative for the developer will get out of the project. And there are multiple clauses that allow them to do that. And if that were to happen, then the city or the state would be left to pick up the tab. And we already know that it is astronomical, which is why we're told that we need to partner with a private developer, because public funding is not available to such extent that the city, state, or feds could pick up the tab. So this is my opinion. I think it is very risky. I am very much looking forward to a town hall next week with our elected officials. I hope that they will be able to answer this question. I have circulated this memo, and I'm hoping to get more specifics on how this funding financing structure plays out with reduced funding for Section 8. But I think it's a very, very important point. George, I don't know if you want to add anything.
That was great.
Thank you. All right, moving on to Christina. Christina, you are permitted to speak. You can unmute yourself.
Hi, good evening. I I don't even know where to begin. I did ask a question in the chat around the reduction of open space and green space with the NYCHA preferred rezoning, and I'm also wondering, inspired by the wind tunnel question, if city, what is it called? The urban heat island effect, if that was actually measured within the EEIS, and what are the implications?
So I'm going to actually, I'll answer the urban heat island effect first, and saying it's not part of this. But Alihan, is it possible for you to pop up a plan view of, and we could just show the amount of open space that's lost from one to the other?
Sure. Yes. Let me share my screen.
I mean, it's better to see it, especially if you're familiar with these places, because we can look at the 3D and plan. There you go.
Yep. So let's first actually look at Chelsea Elliott. So this is the existing conditions, and switching into rezoning alternative. And I will switch to the city of Yes, the latest alternative as well. There you go.
So it loses open space, but what happens with a lot of the open space is it becomes enclosed in yards and courts behind buildings, right? So you no longer have open space that fronts the street, or not very much open space that fronts the street. You have some, but a lot of it ends up in these spaces that are essentially the back of the building, right, where it becomes a more privatized space.
Yes, George, especially for the rezoning scenario, it almost keeps it within kind of like a campus style open space, because you lose access from 27th Street and 25th Street. So most of the open space is only accessible through either the buildings or through 26th Street. Whereas in current conditions, it's kind of like open throughout 25th, 26th, and 27th Street.
Yeah, that's right.
Let me go to the Fulton site. Give me 1 second.
We can measure how much that changes, but we haven't done that. We could just look at it visually
I
and
just
see it.
think about all the trees that are older than me that might be removed through this, and it breaks my heart.
Yeah, so they're going to be preparing the site. You should expect that all the trees go, and that some will be replanted, but they're not going to be as mature. I'm sorry. Yeah.
This is the Fulton site. So this is the existing conditions, and I will switch into the rezoning alternative. So the rezoning alternative kind of like leaves, I don't want to call it a mid-block, but mid-development open space throughout 16 all the way to the 19th Street. So it follows the existing buildings footprints and kind of like opens it up. And then we still see open spaces tucked within the buildings. And then the City of Yes alternative for this side would look like this. So the City of Yes alternative doesn't really create that linked open space concept, but it's mostly the alleys in between the buildings that would be referred as open spaces.
Alihan, you spent a lot of time with these. Do you know why that they're keeping these through blocks on both of the rezoning scenario and this scenario, and why they didn't make a more consistent street wall?
I think the only reason is to have legal windows between buildings.
Yeah. Okay.
Because they're trying to orient the buildings north-south rather than east-west, or at least part of the buildings. So in order to have legal rooms, bedrooms, and windows, I think they need that. And
Mhm.
the continuity is just probably like a design phase idea. And they try to use the same building footprint. If you could recall, the heights are different, but it's almost like modular Lego blocks. So the same kind of like extended C-shaped building rotates and fills out pretty much the Ninth Avenue sites.
Great, that's
And
very helpful.
since we were talking about wind, George, while we're actually talking, I did a quick search on the urban design chapter. So they only say in a half paragraph that a wind study is not really needed since the site is not right next to a waterfront. I think that's what Secor says, according to their documentation. So there's no wind study that was done.
Wow. It's only a short block away. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
I see the water there.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
All right. Interesting. Thank you so much.
Of course.
The next question goes to Rosemary Garcia. Rosemary, you're permitted to speak.
Hello, good evening. My question is, my building is 418 West 17th Street. When will I be moving into the new building? What year?
Very good question. I think it's very, very hard to predict, and I would hate to give you information that is inaccurate. I think, though, George, that the construction schedule actually shows a little bit of that planned phase demolition.
Yeah.
So, and I don't want to necessarily take too much time right now, Rosemary,
okay.
but I'm happy to, look at the available information, and then I can share that with you offline. And, I'm happy to speak with you. I will, make sure that you have my phone number. So if you want to give me a call, we can, I can point you to the actual information. But, once again, I want to be really, really sensitive to the fact that we do not represent the developer, and we do not represent NYCHA, and we certainly don't want to speak and give information that is not like absolutely spot on accurate. So I would not want to give you an information that you would not be totally accurate. But once again, Rosemary, I'm not trying to dodge the question. There is information in the document that we're discussing that shows, generally speaking, when it is anticipated to happen. And we can share that with you.
Do you have
Rosemary,
my,
are you able to tell
email?
Did you register with you? I do have your email because you registered to be, and you needed to give your email address. So I do have it.
So can you send me all that information to my email?
Absolutely. And I will give you my phone number. And if you want to follow up, I'm happy to speak with you. If you want to speak with George, we can also arrange that.
Thank you. Since I'm homebound, thank you, all of you, very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your question. Lizette Colon, who's next, is telling us in the Q&A that her microphone doesn't work, and she wants me to ask a question on her behalf. And this is what she writes. How can we delay this absurd and undemocratic process as the community is not fully informed of all this new proposal, i.e. City of Yes, mitigation impact not fully addressed, no transparency in the process, especially for the Fulton and Elliott-Chelsea residents, Section 9. I appreciate the observations, but we are concentrating on the buildings and not the residents. Please give us a plan to move forward in fighting back this unfair plan. That is Lizette's question.
Well, Layla, you're more political than I am. And ultimately that's at this point, politics is the way you fight.
Yeah. So, Lizette, thank you for the question. I just want to emphasize that we invited George and Alihan, who are urban planners, and therefore, this is why we're talking about urban planning, which is not to say that we're not, concerned with other issues, as you know. At that particular juncture, I would say that in order to fight this plan, it is going to be either a political solution. I have seen in the Q&A questions about a new administration that may that would come into office in 2026, and that may have an impact. And then the other course of action to actually fight this proposal would be in the courts, and fighting a legal challenge. It is, as of now today, it would be premature, but once the record of decision is issued, the case would be deemed ripe to be, brought in front of a judge. So, those would be the two, main courses of action at this particular juncture. It could also be that, the developer realizes that the funding and financing is uncertain, and they decide to just walk away. Which, we've seen these situations happen again. One thing I will say is that if you take the example of the Elizabeth Street Garden, this was a fight that the community fought for 10 years, and last week they won. And they felt that they had exhausted every possible venue, and so until it's over, it's not over. And I want to give this little bit of hope and appetite to fight, because it is worth it. I see that we have questions in the Q&A from Michael Kimmelman. We thank him for attending. And Michael is asking questions about Section 9. Section 9 attaches to the unit, while Section 8 attaches to the person, not the unit, meaning Section 8, unlike Section 9, can be transferred to other developments, including market rate ones. Also, NYCHA has said publicly that the financial agreement will remain unchanged for the NYCHA tenants. Do you have reason to think that is untrue? Okay, so there are two types of Section 8. There's tenant-based Section 8, and there's project-based Section 8. This is project-based, and the Section 8 status will be attached to the apartment, not to the tenant. On the financial arrangement, the rent that tenants will pay will mostly remain the same. And the rent structure is actually not the same for all the tenants. Seniors don't are not subject to the same rate as people who are in the workforce. The income limit is also different under Section 9 than it is under Section 8. So overall, what we're told, once again, we have not seen these contracts, but what we're told is that the lease, the new lease under Section 8, is going to be, have the same guarantees and protections as the protections that exist under Section 9. That's for the existing tenants. What we don't know is what will happen for new tenants that will come and occupy the units as time goes by and the current tenants move out and relocate. We do not know under what kind of lease they would be operating under. Then Michael asked, you anticipate my follow-up, which is how Trump will undermine HUD and the entire subsidized housing calculus, which seems the riskiest aspect of such a complex long-term PPP. Yes, absolutely. So Michael, I will take the liberty, given that you're asking those questions, to actually share my memo. It is 16 pages. It will give you a headache, but hopefully you will find it enlightening. All right, moving on to live questions. Let's go to Paul Devlin. Paul, you're permitted to speak. You can unmute.
Hey, everybody. Leila, thanks so much for pulling this together. And Lydia, George, always great to hear from you and hear your expertise in planning in our community. Two quick questions, and I'll keep it to 30 seconds. George, overall, at the beginning of this, you said mid-block bulk is not standard for zoning and planning. Can you give a quick commentary on your thoughts on the mid-block bulk? Second question is, with the new City of Yes proposal, one of the concerns I'm struggling with in looking at this is the relocation of residents. In the preferred upzoning plan, majority of the NYCHA residents will move once from their current home into the newly constructed home. In a non-rezoning alternative, they would move, more of them would have to move into temporary housing before moving into their permanent home. And do you see anything on the sequencing of relocation in this new City of Yes proposal such that fewer NYCHA residents would have to relocate more often or limit the number of movements into temporary housing?
Oh, that's
And I didn't see
really,
anything in there myself, so.
that's a really good question. Okay, last question first. Sequencing of relocation is not something that we looked at. You know, this came out on Friday, and we've been focusing on all the massing. But that's a really good question. Is how do these affect residents in terms of their inconvenience and their difficulties? I will say that they did have the City of Yes proposal had its own construction schedule, and it was different from everyone else, meaning it had more detail on it. And so that might very well impact the residents. We'll have to get back to you on that one. And then your question regarding mid-block bulk. I'm not saying, that having less bulk on the mid-block is either good or bad. I'm just saying in terms of the pattern of New York City, it goes back to the 1916 zoning resolution, which essentially had the first setback from the street based upon the width of streets. And so you had to start setting back sooner when your streets were narrower. And so what ultimately ended up happening is, from that time, the bigger buildings were located on the avenues and the smaller buildings on the mid blocks. And we've been zoning that way ever since 1916, right? It's because the 1961 zoning resolution is also like that. Now, there are exceptions. If you look throughout New York City, there are some places that don't follow that pattern, for sure. But in Manhattan, that is the typical pattern. And to have taller buildings on the avenues. And part of it is that you have more light and air. You have more space when the street is wider. And the idea is that from a planning and development standard, it can handle more density on the wide streets than it can on the avenues. Generally speaking, those specifics always matter.
Thank you. Paul,
Thank you, George.
your question, I will allow a follow-up.
Oh, no follow-up. That was very helpful, George. Thank you. And the relocation issue is something I struggle with the rezoning, because this is one of the rare cases we're looking at zoning issues that directly impact residents in their homes. And
yeah,
I struggle quite a bit with that.
It's really good. It's really good. We'll look into it.
Great. Thank you, Paul. Very important. I saw that at some point Inga had her hand up. Inga, are you still on the call, and do you want to raise your hand again, and I will allow you to speak. I see you. Inga, you're permitted to speak. You can unmute.
Thank you, Layla. I actually typed in my question. Some of the things that were asked I had heard, so that was good. My question is, with the, for example, on 25th Street, with those tall buildings being built right up against those small 3- and 4-story old brownstones, how likely is it that they will not be damaged?
Okay, so in New York City,
yeah.
We very often have buildings that abut each other, have no yards, and there are lots of safety procedures in place at the Department of Buildings, underpinning and other seismic gaps that are now required between buildings, so they actually don't go brick to brick, but they actually have a gap between them.
Right.
But damage does happen sometimes, right? I mean, it's not unheard of to
Right.
have old buildings damaged by new buildings, but there's a lot of safeguards that are put into place to try to prevent that, but there's no way to absolutely guarantee that that's not going to happen. It's something that is
That
possible.
happens often.
Yeah, no, it does. It
Right.
happens.
So entire blocks could be shaken and their foundation. I mean, these are very old, small buildings. So
Yeah,
this, you know, thumping into the bedrock and into whatever to make these pilings and foundations will likely hurt the buildings. That's aside, not good. Then just the shadows, there's the only way they can stop the shadows over the park would be to put in arena lighting, which is lovely, versus sunlight. So that's, you know, an issue. I love the mitigation there, natural sunlight, and then they're going to kill 300 plus very mature trees with global warming. And will they put in mature trees that are close to this size, or are they going to put in those little tiny sticks that, you know, in 30 years, none of us will see the difference?
I don't think there's a budget for mature trees on this, or at least I don't think they proposed mature trees on this. I don't know that for a fact. I will double check and get back to Layla.
Thank you. I mean, you know, Little Island has at least somewhat mature trees.
Yeah.
So I would hope that the developer with all of this money is going to do that. My third question, and I'm sorry for three, is do people really realize that their apartments are going to be downsized or right-sized, as they call it? And will some of these apartments, people are moving out of these old apartments, getting these brand new apartments, are they going to be on the top floors? I mean, they said they would mix them, intermingle them, but will any of these be Section 8 be on the penthouse level, or, you know, the top 10 floors with the views?
No, Inga, the way the spread is going to be is that all the public housing tenants who are currently, you know, under Section 9 and living in these two campuses are going to be clumped into 3 buildings per campus. Okay, it is not integrated, meaning that, you know, the public housing tenants will not be integrated in the mixed income buildings. The mixed income buildings, like luxury and income restricted, which is still, you know, I mean, they call it affordable, but
Right.
it is still, you know, very expensive rent, will be entirely segregated from the tenants who are currently public housing tenants.
Okay.
And therefore, the public housing tenants, once they are relocated in these new buildings, will occupy the entirety of these new buildings, you know, top to bottom. It will be, you know, public house. So the top floors will be occupied by public housing tenants, as well as the lower floors. It is just that, you know, the size of the apartments, and that has been disclosed, and it is abundantly clear, the size will be drastically changed. Currently, and, you know, I think especially at Fulton, you have a significant number of 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, and 4-bedroom apartments that accommodate families. And the spread of the unit size is going to be vastly different. There will be many, many more 1-bedroom apartments. And the tenants will be, as you said, right-sized, which means that, you know, if they occupy a 2-bedroom apartment, but they are, you know, only a couple, because, you know, the children grew up and left the household, then they will be relocated into a studio or 1-bedroom apartment. So the size that, you know, people will occupy is likely to be different from what it is today. But what is important is that, you know, as we look to the future, the campuses will no longer be able to accommodate those large families.
Correct.
That you know, used to be really, you know, the core of the makeup of these two campuses, especially for Fulton.
Right. So yeah, that's going to drastically change the entire neighborhood without families and the children. no trees, no sunlight, but we'll have, fluorescent lighting perhaps, and
especially in winter.
and noise and traffic for 16 years. So it sounds like a great plan to me.
Yeah, and
yes,
just for everybody, Inga is just being sarcastic. I just want to make
absolutely.
it doesn't get lost, and you don't end up getting quoted somewhere saying.
No, this was definitely a sarcastic comment, and yeah, people are gonna lose their houses, and the family part is sad because yeah, there's no room for them to have families anymore if their children happen to be move out or their kids grow up. It's just they aren't going to exist. Those apartments are never going to exist for families again.
Correct.
Grandparents who have their children come visit. Okay.
All right. Thank you, Inga.
Thank you.
I will say, can I, if just one comment,
please.
is that the income restricted units, meaning the MIH units or the affordable units that are not Section 8, they do have to be mixed into the building. They can't be like all studios. They can't all be small. They have to be the same sort of representation. However, you can exclude them from, it's either the top 20% of floors or the top 30% of floors.
Right.
So that the highest floors can be entirely market rate.
Exactly. Okay. Well, this sounds not fair. It doesn't sound like it's not good all around. And the developer can always back out when he feels that it's not working.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you, Inga. Moving on to Motoko Shoboji. You are permitted to speak. You're permitted to speak, Motoko.
Oh, hi. Thank you very much. Yes, thank you so much. It's really helpful to understand. So I am a mother of a child at PS 33 Chelsea Prep, which is right in the same block as this redevelopment. And we did send some comments during the DEIS time. And we still don't really see, we asked for shadow study for our classroom, but the only thing they did was just for the playground. And they really didn't, at all pay attention to any effect that would have for the natural light for our classrooms. And I'm wondering, like, is there anything that they could do, or can we speak up for that? And then also the other, thing is like our school building was built at the same time as this development in 1940s actually. And I'm just wondering why our building is completely ignored, and even the mitigation plan isn't adequately addressed at all. I'm wondering if you know how we can advocate for us to be not ignored.
Great. Thank you, George.
So the way we study shadows in environmental review, it's spelled out in a technical manual. And what that technical manual tells us is that shadows on open spaces like parks, playgrounds, matter, and that shadows on classrooms don't matter. It's not something that's studied. So the thing that you're concerned about is not something that is even in the scope of an environmental review. Yeah, it's about livability of plants and then some historic resources in terms of like stained glass windows and things like that. But as far as like natural light coming through a window, it is not something that is part of the scope. And so they're not going to respond to it. Even if you commented on that in the EIS, they're like, that's not what we look at. They care about the playground. And they say, and they disclose that there's going to be impacts on it. And then regarding impacts on your building, they do disclose impacts, noise impacts on on the school building. They've identified most of the western portion of your building as going to be receiving impacts from noise, construction noise. And they have developed a mitigation plan that's going to lessen it, but it's still going to have significant adverse environmental impacts on the school building. And part of it is trying to advocate for better, more complete mitigation measures to keep you from experiencing the negative impacts of that noise. I'm not sure what other impacts will be affecting your school building, and probably traffic, I would imagine, would be one, especially during construction. But I think one of the things to keep in mind is that as this moves forward, if it goes forward as planned, 311 is your friend, complaining, especially if they're not meeting the minimum requirements that they've committed themselves to in the environmental review. We live in New York City, and squeaky wheels get grease sometimes. So complain, complain, complain.
Thank you, George. The next question goes to Susan Kenny. Susan, you're permitted to speak.
Layla, I wanted to talk about what I'm hearing about the housing. Is it a go that we're gonna get new apartments, or is it a go? Is it not a go that nobody wants demolishment in the place?
Well, as you can tell, there's a lot of controversy, and especially at Elliott-Chelsea, the tenant leaders are staunchly opposed to demolition. We know that there is a number of tenants at Fulton who are also opposed.
I just got a certified letter too. I just got a certified letter in the mail.
Okay. There are still a number of authorizations and permits that need to be in place before anything can happen. So certainly, as George said, they are moving forward and aggressively.
Yeah, but I want the next thing is I don't want to go to a place and say they're gonna move me out of my apartment, and then once I go to the new building, I'm gonna lose my apartment. I'm gonna lose myself and be homeless. That I don't want.
Yeah, no, I know it's a lot of uncertainty, and and once the buildings are under private management, it is going to be very different. So you and I can speak. I promised that I would call you back now that the election is over. We can talk about that. I just want to mention very quickly that there was actually an election for city council, and a tenant of Fulton. Thank you, Susan. Thank you. Thank you. And I will call you tomorrow, okay? I just want to mention that Jackie Lara was running for city council, and it is interesting when you look at the electoral district level. Jackie Lara actually got the majority of the votes in the electoral districts that represent Fulton and in the electoral districts that represent Elliott-Chelsea. And Ms. Lara was running on a aggressive anti-demolition platform. So I think that is a good indication of where the tenants stand. Before I move to Roberta, I just want to read a comment in the Q&A. This is a question from Tito Delgado, who is asking, and now I lost it, bear with me. Is there a written contract for the tenants indicating right to return to the new apartments? The short and technical answer to that is, as far as I know and as far as I have been explained, those contracts have not yet been seen by the broader public and by the tenants. I speak under the authority of a number of them who are on this call. If I'm, misspeaking, please let me know. But I don't think these contracts have been shared with tenants. It is our understanding that there will be such contracts, but we have not seen them yet. So moving on, we are almost at 8:30. Roberta, you get the next question. You're permitted to speak. You can unmute.
So I have a question.
What did I do? Roberta, I'm sorry.
Okay, let me try this.
I made a mistake. Sorry. Go ahead.
I mean, I'm correct to assume that the current tenants will be segregated from the other tenants coming in, the market rate and the other quote affordable, unaffordable housing. They've segregated. So that's number one. The other thing is, if we can't do anything right now, one of the things we can do is remember that none of our elected officials supported the community. And so we have to have long memories when they want to run again, or if they want to do something. But the last thing is, what happens to ULURP in this process? Is the community board completely left out of this process now?
So George, do you want to answer this one?
So the preferred scenario, meaning the lead agency's preferred scenario, is a rezoning scenario, which will require a zoning map amendment, which will require ULURP. So full ULURP involving the community board, the borough president, the city planning commission, and the council members. So that, I think, is still the likely way forward. However, they did add this new alternative, which does not require a rezoning, which I think gives them an option in case ULURP doesn't go the way that they want.
And I think it's important for people to understand that once the permits are issued, then it is at the discretion of the developer to choose how they want to go about it. They could decide, it's not like anything is going to be forced on them. They could decide to do the rezoning, and then they have to jump through those additional hoops, i.e. ULURP, or they could decide to do the City of Yes alternative, in which case it would be entirely as of right, and they could just move forward, and there would be no opportunity for the community board, the borough president, and the city council to become involved. Is that correct, George?
That's my understanding. I mean, there's the question of disposition and whether this would require disposition, and I think the answer to that, disposition is another type of ULURP action, but I think that this does not qualify for disposition because NYCHA is a public benefit corporation. So
yeah, my understanding is that the disposition is actually done through this process that is a HUD regulation, and that is known as Section 18, that basically plans for the disposition of the land and the conversion from Section 9 to private management Section 8, which does not trigger ULURP. And certainly what we can say is that, the city has done a number of these conversions. And, there's a number of these NYCHA houses that have been converted from Section 9 to private management Section 8, and they have not triggered ULURP. Next question goes to Renee. Renee, you're permitted to speak.
Okay, so with this scenario, I'm not going to ask a question, but I'm going to say to people that, as Layla and so many people continue to say, it's not a done deal. So we have to keep fighting. It's not, oh my God. Yes, we have to keep fighting. We know our electeds are not listening to the community. Many people voted for Eric. You knew this. So having long memories is nice, but remembering who people are, what communities they listen to and don't, that's what you have to remember. That's what you have to deal with. Some of you are going to have to start running for office. Jackie did it. That should tell you it's possible. A NYCHA tenant whose home might be demolished had enough strength and determination to fight. That's what everyone else needs to do. Jackie is a role model here. She has shown us a way. She did something people don't think NYCHA tenants are capable of. People from NYCHA voted. People don't think we're capable of that, but we did, and we do. So what I want to say is keep fighting. It's going to be hard, but we have to keep fighting. By giving up, we get nowhere. That's what I'm going to say. And remember, first and foremost, this isn't about buildings. This is about people, how we treat with one another, and humanity. And also to deal with housing as a whole. We need to stop using the language of affordable housing and low income. We need to use the numbers. Low income is $56,000 to over $90,000. Let's use the numbers. Let's not use their language. Let's stop applauding something that does not work. And I think when people saw today the Maple and what the cost and how much you have to earn just to live there, that's a shock for you. We need to understand that the housing we have, we are on valuable property. I know this is long, but I'm going to finish this. And that we are in a vulnerable place. And that's just not us. It's Penn South. We have the biggest footprints in Chelsea. They're coming after us all. And that's rent control and rent stabilized. They're coming for everyone. And they're coming for New York. The people who have lived here the longest, the people with the most stable housing, they're coming. They're here. We need to acknowledge that and fight. That's all I need to say.
Thank you so much, Renee. It is 8:31. I know that we still have some hands up, but I think Renee is going to have the final word. Renee is the president of the Tenants Association for Elliott-Chelsea. I thank you for your comments. I thank you for the fight that you've been fighting. You are also an inspiration, and all the tenants are really amazing and truly inspiring. And this Chelsea community is proud to be calling these tenants our neighbors and our friends. And I'm happy we're able to provide this webinar. It will be available on YouTube. I will circulate a link. I thank you very much. I thank you, George, and you, Alihan, for all the work and all the help that you have been providing this community in understanding what this project is about. I wish you all a very, very good evening. And as Renee said, we're going to keep fighting. So thank you so much and have a good night.
Good night.